It's widely known the principal money-making racket for the Mafia is drugs. The mafias in Italy and Sicily, particularly Sicilian Cosa Nostra, Ndrangheta, and Camorra, are all heavily involved with the drug trade. And despite the no drug rule being in effect for decades, the American mafia was also knee-deep in the drug business. Beginning from the 1940s up until the early 1970s, heroin was being refined in labs in Marseille, France, and distributed through North America, including New York City. That pipeline was referred to as the French Connection, allegedly a pipeline that Lucky Luciano helped structure, where the heroin would go from Turkey poppy fields through Marseille refineries and smuggled into the United States. Back in 1973, France was defined as the source of more than 75% of the heroin consumed by American drug users. President Nixon declared that drug addiction was the United States' public enemy number one.
America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse. In order to fight and defeat this enemy, it is necessary to wage a new all-out offensive. I have asked the Congress to provide the legislative authority and the funds to fuel this kind of an offensive.
As a result of international police cooperation, the majority of French and Corsican smugglers were arrested and the Marseille refineries were shut down. By 1977, Sicilian Cosa Nostra strategically took over from the French. Sicilian bosses and their relatives in America, also Cosa Nostra, took control of the two most valuable ends of the heroin trade, the refining and street sales. Most of this took place between Palermo and the United States, each side controlling its end. They were mafias on different sides of the globe, working together like a well-oiled machine. Heroin shipped to the United States, and the money was sent back to Sicily. Italian law enforcement estimate the Palermo Mafia took in $1.3 billion a year. Numerous former members of the Sicilian Mafia echoed a similar opinion by claiming that overnight the bosses in Palermo became millionaires. Bosses like Stefano Bottante, Salvatore Inzerillo, and Gaetano Badalamenti partnered with members of the Sicilian faction of the Gambino family. Years later, Badalamenti led what became known as the Pizza Connection, where billions of dollars in heroin was trafficked and distributed from mafia-owned pizzerias throughout the United States. In the 1970s and 80s, mafia members and independent organizations, such as the East Harlem Purple Gang, took over the drug trade in Harlem and the Bronx, some even partnering with black kingpins like Bumpy Johnson, Frank Matthews, and Nicky Barnes. And of course, where there's drugs, there's violence. The Gambino and Bonanno families back then had an unofficial war where drug dealers from both families were being knocked off. Drug trafficking is a highly lucrative business, one that comes with severe consequences. Drug addiction, specifically heroin, was on the rise years ago, and the mob used that addiction to their advantage. Supply and demand, the negative impact it had on individuals, families, and society as a whole didn't matter. Drugs was the motivational factor behind the leadership change of the Gambino family in the mid-1980s. Paul Castellano at the time was the family's boss and was strictly enforcing the no-drug policy. But truth be told, he did so hypocritically, as it was common knowledge his relatives, the Cherry Hill Gambinos, along with the Sicilian faction of the family, was dealing heavily in narcotics. But Castellano instead aimed his attention at the Gotti crew, who were also heavily involved in narcotic dealing. It would be tapes from an FBI bug in the house of Gambino member Angelo Ruggiero that became the focal point for Castellano. Tapes that he demanded and would never receive. What he did receive, conversely, was bullets to the brain. Over the years, the American mob has distanced itself from the drug trade, partly due to moral posturing and part risk assessment. That's not to say they don't dabble in narcotics from time to time, but definitely not on the scale as years ago. Drugs bring too much law enforcement heat and carry lengthy sentences, something that can entice people to cooperate and save their own skin. And this was one of the main reasons why Carlo Gambino pushed for the no-drug rule. In present day, it's extremely rare to hear of an organized crime case where drug trafficking is among the charges. The mob practices risk management and learn from past mistakes that some crimes are just not worth the risk. Nowadays, the charges involved in indictments are extortion and typically gambling. I was recently asked why I cover the news in Italy, and my response was that almost daily, Italian authorities are making arrests or fugitives are captured in other countries, all for the same charges: international drug trafficking. From the mid 1980s up until the early 1990s, the Sicilian Mafia was severely weakened by investigative crackdowns and eventually trials. They once dominated the drug trade, and the Ndrangheta sensed their weakness and moved right in and gradually established relations with Latin American cartels, with the main objective to cutting out the middleman, unlike the Sicilians, who relied on intermediaries. By the 2000s, the Ndrangheta controlled 80% of the cocaine market in Europe. Over time, they began sharing their cartel connections with other Italian mafias, including Sicilian Cosa Nostra and the Camorra. And this was not necessarily done out of generosity, but more so strategically. Italian mafias are more often than not rivals, but when it comes to international drug deals, collaboration is required. The Ndrangheta takes a cut from each transaction and controls the flow of cocaine into Europe. They have access to the ports, so by coordinating large shipments and reselling to their mafia counterparts, they essentially became wholesalers. The fact that the other organizations depended on them gave them leverage. Investigations revealed the Ndrangheta was managing multi-ton shipments, some of which was distributed to the other mafias. To my knowledge, I don't believe the American mafia was moving drugs on a multi-ton scale. Just to put it into further perspective, the Ndrangheta is believed to earn tens of billions per year. If you haven't given this video a like yet, please take the time now and do so, as it helps with YouTube's algorithm. And for anyone who wants to show appreciation for videos like this, or to help me continue making them, you could do so by donating with the Super Thanks icon down below, or through the PayPal Cash App links in the video's description. Let me quickly mention my blog, also called Sit Down News, especially for those of you who still enjoy reading. It can be found at sitdownnews.com and is a paid subscription. Just over the past 2 years, authorities have made hundreds of drug-related arrests. For example, in May 2023, 132 suspects were arrested that were connected to the Ndrangheta across Italy and several European countries. In September 2023, 81 suspects linked to the Ndrangheta were arrested. In May 2024, another Ndrangheta sweep netted 109 suspects. In February 2025, 150 suspects linked to Sicilian Cosa Nostra were arrested. In March 2025, 26 mafia arrests in Rome targeted a drug trafficking network. In May 2025, 21 people associated to the Camorra were also arrested. And just this past week, 23 suspects from Sicilian Cosa Nostra in Mangialupi were charged with drug trafficking and the sale of narcotics. The mafias of Italy, as you could see, are not opposed to drug trafficking. It's their bread and butter and remains their top source of revenue, despite the risk. For them, the reward outweighs any worry. They take their chances, and in all honesty, they could care less what their American counterparts are up to, unless they're looking for shipments of goods.